What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be, well, the X-Men once again. But this time, it's going to be about Fatal Attraction because we had just wrapped up our coverage over that crossover for the X-Men. It came out in 1994, but basically it was the first X-Men crossover that had all the different X-teams coming together. X-Factor, X-Men, X-Force, Uncanny X-Men, and Excalibur as well. There was also a Wolverine issue in there as well because it has the biggest moment in Wolverine's timeline where you have Magneto ripping off the adamantium off his bones. But either way, this full story video is going to have all 6 chapters of that crossover in one big video. And so I do hope you enjoy today's full story video. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to begin our coverage over Fatal Attractions. I have been telling you guys that sooner or later we are going to begin our coverage over Fatal Attractions. But before we actually properly dive into this crossover, there are some things we have to talk about. Now, when it came to Fatal Attractions, it was another X-Men crossover. This time, you had all 5 teams: Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, X-Force, Excalibur, X-Factor. All 5 teams are taking part in this event. You also have a Wolverine book as well that take part in this crossover. But here's the thing about Fatal Attractions. So when it comes to Fatal Attractions, the first chapter is actually X-Factor issue number 92. Now, I went on the internet to kind of see how other people truly felt about this certain issue. And I realized that there were other people out there who were kind of like me, where if you're believing that this chapter right here is part of the crossover, you're going to feel a tad bit wrong here. And the reason why, because as you read issue number 92 for X Factor, you realize that it's not really part of Fatal Attractions like the other chapters are, because X-Force, Excalibur, X-Men, they all kind of fit together to tell this overall story of Magneto coming back, attacking the X-Men, doing a horrible thing to Wolverine. All those chapters kind of seem like they go together in some kind of way. But over for X Factor, it feels more of like Scott Lobdell was trying his best to pick up where Peter David left off at, because Peter David left at issue number 89 for X Factor. But there were some loose ends that weren't tied up before he had left. And so for Scott, it's kind of like, okay, I'm coming in and trying to pick up where Peter left off at. And so with him doing that, it's also him trying to set things up for Fatal Attractions, like the whole idea of the return of the Acolytes once again attacking a nearby hospital. And so as we get into the opening pages for this chapter, we actually pick up at a hospital. Not really a hospital, really more of a hospice care center for people who are on the verge of death. And really, you have this nurse telling us what went down when it came to the Acolytes attacking that facility. Now, the only reason why they are attacking that facility because it's full of a bunch of humans that they believe should be killed off just like that. And so they barge into that facility, killing off people left and right. It does not even matter. They're at hospice care. They're on the verge of death. They don't care. They have to die. And doing all of this in the name of Magneto. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, they don't know that Magneto is still alive. Like, he's not officially back yet to the rest of the world. But there were some clues left behind in different books saying like, hey, Magneto is coming back. And when he does, is going to be a huge problem down the road. And so right now, the Acolytes are being led by Fabian Cortez. Now, Fabian Cortez had killed off Magneto to make him a martyr, to get other people more inspired to do Magneto's work, to attack the human race, that mutants should take over the world. And so right now, when it comes to this group of Acolytes, they're over here killing off humans left or right in the name of their god, Magneto, because humans do not deserve to live. Mutants should rule the world. And so we see them kill almost every single person in that facility. So now we jump back over to the present day where you have X Factor hearing this story by the nurse, the only person who has survived the actual incident. Now, here's the thing. You do have this lady telling the story, but it's really more of the book trying to focus on Quicksilver. And the reason why, because by this point in Marvel Comics, he was still the son of Magneto before the whole retcon down the road saying that he was never the son of Magneto. But by this point, he was. And so for Pietro, he hates the idea of hearing these stories about his father. It is not like, oh, hey, my dad was a great man. No, he knows that his father was an evil man. His father is just so messed up. And so for Pietro, he hates the idea that his father had inspired a group of people to go out of their way to attack innocent people like this nurse. And really, while you have X Factor leaving her room, she dies right there. She flatlines on that bed. And so for Quicksilver, it's more of like, great. There's now a group of people out there that my father had inspired to go out of their way to attack humans, to kill off humans because mutants should rule the world. And so for Quicksilver, he hates the idea of just being the son of Magneto. But like I said a moment ago, when it comes to Magneto, for the Acolytes, they look at him as their god, as their great savior of the mutant race. But here's the thing. If Magneto is their god, that means Quicksilver is their Jesus. Because you then had this one Acolyte who was able to hide in the hospital. And she sees Pietro. And she's all like, oh my God. It is the son of Magneto, like he is their Jesus. And so she freaks out and she goes back to her leader of the Acolytes, and that would be Fabian Cortez. Now, like I said a moment ago, Fabian Cortez was the person who had killed off Magneto to make him a martyr so that people would be inspired to go out there to attack the human race. But also, when it comes to Fabian Cortez, he's part of the Upstart organization. Now remember, the Upstart organization was a group of people who would go out of their way to kill other mutants out there to receive points. If you had the most points, then you were the actual leader of the group. If you killed off a more powerful mutant, you would get more points for that kill. And so for Fabian, he had supposedly killed off Magneto and received a lot of points. But recently he found out that, well, maybe, just maybe, Magneto is actually alive. And if he is coming back very soon. But also that means that Fabian had lost a lot of points in the Upstart organization. But either way, he does hear about the idea of Pietro, the son of Magneto. And he wants to use Pietro as a way to kind of continue his control over the Acolytes. But getting back over to the Pentagon, we do learn that they were able to capture at least one member of the Acolytes, X Factor was. And so their main goal is to interrogate this guy, to hopefully get some kind of information out of him. Now, you do have Havoc and Val Cooper kind of go back and forth, and really, I'll explain why here in a moment, but I kind of want to focus more on the whole idea of this interrogation, because you have the team trying their best to get all the info they need to figure out what is the next move of the Acolytes, but also possibly where is their base so that they can finally take down this group. But then Pietro walks in, and when he walks in, like I said earlier, they look at him as their Jesus. And so for this one member of the Acolyte who's now a prisoner, when he sees Pietro, he bows down to Pietro like, oh my God, you are the Jesus to our organization. I will tell you everything you want to know. Just like that. You didn't have Pietro being able to get all the info he needs about what is possibly the next move of the Acolytes. Now, 1 hour later, we actually see that you have Val Cooper try to take Quicksilver over to another military base that's actually going to be attacked by the Acolytes, because that one Acolyte was able to give Pietro all the info he needs to tell them what is the Acolytes' next move. Now, for Havoc, who is the actual leader of X Factor, he wants the entire team to go. But for Val Cooper, she says no. She only wants her and Quicksilver to go, and that's really it. Now, here comes the big problem. You see, for Val Cooper, back in I want to say it was issue number 86 or 87, where we saw that while every single member of X Factor were able to get some kind of therapy session, something grabbed Val Cooper. And ever since that moment, she has been acting different, more aggressive. Now, we're also kind of left to believe in the possibility that she was replaced. Either way, she tells Havoc and the rest of X Factor they cannot go to this other military base. And she's also hoping that with all the Acolytes trying to treat Pietro like he is Jesus, maybe when they arrive at the other military base, they won't actually attack it. They'll stop because they see Pietro as their Jesus and stop attacking the actual base. She also says because Havoc is too aggressive now, too hot-headed, and he might cause a lot of damage at that military base. And so her and Pietro, they leave. Now, for Havoc, he always has a backup plan. You see, for me personally, and guys, don't hate me for this, because I do know some folks out there are like, how dare you say anything wrong about Chris Claremont? Guys, it's just my opinion. We could all be friends still. But for the character of Havoc, I truly felt like Chris Claremont did not really do a great job when it came to the character development of Havoc. I felt like Peter David really did a better job when it came to giving Havoc his time to shine. Like, hey, you know what? This is Havoc. He's more than just the boyfriend to Polaris or the younger brother to Cyclops. That in reality, he could be a good leader just like his brother. And so we see that when it came to Havoc, he always felt like that something was off about Val Cooper ever since those therapy sessions. You see, you have Havoc tell Polaris to track the helicopter that Val and also Pietro are using to head over to that other military base. But then the rest of X Factor, they're going to be using a different jet that was given to them by Forge, where they should be able to follow Val's helicopter without actually being detected. But while trying to do that, they run into Exodus. Now, this is the first appearance of Exodus. And the way the book brings them in, you're kind of like, okay, who is this character? And really, we do not get the chance to learn anything about the character at all because he just goes ahead and disappears just like that, leaving our heroes wondering who the heck that was. And for us as the readers, the same thing as well, like, who was that guy? He does seem very mysterious, but now he's gone and our team can continue to follow Val and also Pietro. Now, I want to jump back over to Cooper and also Pietro because they also brought another character with them, and that would be Random. Now, when it comes to Random, he has the mutant ability to kind of adapt to other mutant abilities. So honestly, he's a hard character to defeat. And really, the last time we saw him, the only reason why our heroes were able to defeat him was by actually giving him money because he's a bounty hunter. The whole idea of, if you pay me money, I'll do the job. If you don't, guess what happens? I ain't doing the job. Either way, Val hired him to come alongside with her and Pietro over to this other military base. Now, this is her also telling a big secret that's going on at this military base. Now, mind you, this base is being run by Senator Kelly. Now, you already know, when it comes to Kelly, his whole thing is that he hates mutants, but at the same time, he still wants to give them a fair chance in the world. It's kind of like he's on that line right there, going back and forth on, if he should help mutants or try to get rid of mutants. And with all that being said, apparently he's the one in charge of this base. And he's very upset of the fact that Val is there, but also alongside with two mutants, Ransom and also Pietro. Now for Pietro, he wants to know what in the world is happening at this military base. What does the Acolytes want so bad from this base? And that is the moment where she shows Pietro and Ransom a room full of Sentinels, a new kind of Sentinels, by taking the old models and trying to fuse those models with the Nimrod program to make newer versions of Sentinels to use against the mutant race. But let's not forget that when it came to Havoc, he made sure they were able to follow Val, Pietro, and also Random over to this other military base. And so when our heroes do arrive, they see what's happening at the moment. They see that Val had just revealed that the government is still working on creating new kinds of Sentinels. And so for Havoc, he's very upset about the idea that he was not even told about this project. Now for Havoc, it's kind of like, listen, you, the government, came to us, the X-Men, and said, hey, listen, we need a superhero team that's full of mutants that's working for the government as a way to build relations between the government and also the mutant race. That was y'all goal. But here y'all right now creating Sentinels. Now for Val, she says, listen, we have a very good reason. Why? Because you have to look at the bigger picture. You have all those different groups out there of mutants, evil mutants that are attacking humans, just like the Acolytes. The humans have the right to protect themselves. Now for Havoc, it's still wrong. But you have Pietro say, no, she's right. And that's really huge. Because you have Pietro saying, you have to understand here, Havoc, that I have been by my father's side for many years, and I have seen what the man has done to humans out there in the world. Humans who were completely innocent, just minding their business. The Acolytes, as we just saw at the very beginning of this video, attacked a group of people who were technically on the verge of death, but killed them all because they were humans. There are evil mutants just like there are evil humans out there. And so as we mutants, we have the right to protect ourselves. But at the same time, so does the humans. They have the right to protect themselves as well from mutants who are technically evil. But while you have everybody talking to one another, that is when you have the Acolytes arrive. Now, it does seem like the Acolytes are here just for the different parts of the Sentinels to use their own personal reasons. We don't get an actual reason here, but it does lead into a battle between the X-Factor team and also the Acolytes. But while the battling is going on, you don't have Pietro actually taking part in the actual battle. And the reason why, because he is called away by Fabian Cortez. You see, you have Fabian Cortez trying to tell Pietro, like, listen, you are the son of Magneto. What you need to do is to actually take your place alongside with us. Matter of fact, you should lead the Acolytes because it's your birthright. You are the son of Magnus, the son of Magneto. Now, for Fabian Cortez, it's also him trying to play some word games on the mind of Pietro. Like, listen, you may hate the idea of your father. You may be trying to run away from the things your father did over the years in this world. But listen, no matter what, you are still his son. And sooner or later, you are going to be just like your father. It's your fate. Now, for Pietro, it's more like, no, I have the right to choose my own fate for my life. I will not be part of what my dad was to this world. This crazy mutant who believed the idea that mutants should just fight for their own right and kill off all humans. It is completely wrong. But for Fabian, he said, I watched you down there. You did not take part in that battle at all. And the reason why, because you realize that both sides are right. There are humans out there who are killing off mutants left and right, killing us off for no good reason. But at the same time, though, there are also mutants out there who are killing off innocent humans for no good reason left and right. So you're kind of wondering which is the right move. But I'm here to help you make the right move. If you choose us, I'll tell my acolytes stop fighting and we'll leave, but you'll be our new leader. Now again, for Pietro, he hates the idea of picking up where his dad left off at, and he says no. And after he says no, you then have every single member of the Acolytes being able to actually teleport away. Now, the way they're able to get the heck out of there is really more because of Amelia Voigt. Now, we have not really learned much about the character just yet. All we know is that she does have some kind of connection with Charles Xavier, but for Amelia, she has the ability to turn matter into vapor. And so she turned every single member of the Acolytes into vapor as a way to leave the base without being captured by X Factor. Now, when it came to Kelly, he told his security team, hey, listen, go ahead and move all the different Sentinels out of the base right now before X Factor can do anything to them at all, including the Acolytes. And so right now, the entire base is completely clean. Now, after all of that, you see, we learned that when it comes to, well, Val Cooper, she was being controlled by the Acolytes. They had something inside of her to kind of make her more aggressive, but also force her hand to show X Factor what the government is doing behind the scenes. The whole idea of these new Sentinels being made. Now, she hates the idea that she had lied to X Factor because she looks at them as her friends. But now they're kind of like, you betrayed us. You did not tell us the truth. You knew about this actual secret. Like, technically, you're almost as bad as my father because you're now giving them tools to use against my people, the mutant race. And so for Val Cooper, she had just lost all respect from the entire team of X Factor. She is no longer their friend anymore. It's more of like, you're on this team because the government wants you there to watch over us. But now we kind of realize that we can't trust you. If you knew about this, you should have told us. Now you're telling us you didn't have the right to tell us. You're telling us that his new project was more of a failsafe just in case X Factor does not work out. But in reality, you still lied to us, to your friends. And so they walk away, and that ends Fatal Attractions for X Factor. And this is where we are. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we are now beginning our coverage over Fatal Attractions, the actual crossover. Now, technically, we already covered the first chapter of Fatal Attractions, and that chapter was more of X Factor just kind of dealing with their own things. But when it comes to the rest of Fatal Attractions, the rest of the chapters really go together, tell an overall story of the X-Men, X-Force, and also Excalibur a tad bit there at the end, kind of dealing with Magneto and his new plan for the mutant race. Now, in today's video, we're only covering the X-Force chapter of Fatal Attractions, where you have our heroes learn of the return of Magneto, but also what Magneto has done to Cable's old base, the Gray Malkin. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, this chapter does take place in X-Force issue number 25. Now, getting into the opening page of this issue, this chapter of Fatal Attractions, we actually pick up with somebody looking at this computer screen of all the different characters who are connected to Charles Xavier in some kind of way. X-Force, X-Factor, and the X-Men. And so apparently this person wants to make an offer to the children of Charles Xavier. But apparently the second generation of children of Charles Xavier. And you see what I mean about that statement here in a moment, but we then jump over to X-Force. And so when we pick up with X-Force, they are just arriving back at home from another mission. Now, when it comes to our heroes, unfortunately, every single time they come back home after doing a mission, they run into another mission or some kind of other situation. And so when our heroes come back to Camp Verde, they believe that they're going to have some downtime. They are going to actually be able to relax, except you didn't have Pharaoh say, we can't relax, guys. There's somebody here. And that person, he's been around the entire camp doing something. And so we have to be on guard. Now remember, by this point in our coverage over X-Force, Cable is no longer the actual leader of the team because thanks to the Executioner's song, he had disappeared at the end of that crossover. And so Cannonball has now been the leader of the actual team. Either way, you do have Cannonball tell the rest of X-Force to go ahead and split up, but to also be careful, but also find the person who has now entered their home without any kind of permission. And so when it comes to X-Force, they have broken up into teams of 2. Now, most of the team, they are taken out very easily by this person who has invaded their home. Now, this person, it does seem like he knows the team very well. The way he is moving, the way he knows when to attack them, how to take them down. He is able to take out teams left and right. But then it comes down to the last 2 members of X-Force that he has to take down. Now, the last 2 members of X-Force to not be taken out was Cannonball and also Boom Boom. Now, you have Cannonball being able to actually sneak up on this person from behind to use his powers on them. Now, after doing that, we do learn who was the person kind of sneaking around Camp Verde and being able to take out the different members of the team. And that would be no other than Cable. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense because most of the team of X-Force was around when Cable was around. He's been there with them and he has studied them up and down. He knows all the good and bad about each of these characters. So it kind of makes sense that he'll be the one to actually be able to take down most of the team. Now, we can't forget that when it comes to Cable, most of the team actually did like the guy, except for 2 people. That will be Sunspot and also Richter. Now, for Richter, we were left to believe in the possibility that Cable was the one who had killed off Richter's father in the past, because that's the reason why Richter hates Cable so much for. But we learned that that's not technically true, that it wasn't really Cable who killed off the father of Richter. It was actually Strife. And remember, Strife looks just like Cable. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, they don't know that Strife is actually the clone of Cable. Right now, they think it's the other way around, where Cable is actually the clone of Strife. Either way, you did have Cable say, it wasn't me, it was Strife. And also Sunspot, I was not the one who killed off your father, it was actually Gideon. And so it's Cable saying, listen, it's time for you guys to stop hating on me and try to work with me. Now, something else we have to remember is the whole idea that after Cable had disappeared at the end of the Executioner Song event, Cannonball had to take over the team. Now, when he did, for Cannonball, he was a great leader, but it was a lot for him to take up when he's just a young boy. He's still in his early, I want to say young adult days. Maybe like 18 or 19. Either way, for Cable, he hates the idea that he had disappeared at the end of the Executioner Song and kind of leaving Cannonball in charge of X-Force. It was a lot for him to actually handle. But at the same time, for Cable, he looks at Cannonball and the rest of X-Force as his children. Now, at first, when he was the leader of the New Mutants and also X-Force, he looked at them as soldiers. But then he realized that these are kids, not soldiers. They're not machines, they're actual people. And so that changed for him, and he began to look at them as well his children. He became a father to these characters. And so for Cable, he realized that he left a lot for Cannonball to take up after he had disappeared. And he wants to make sure that Cannonball is okay. Like, how is he? Not just physically, but also mentally. And you have the 2 characters come together. And it kind of shows that father and son relationship, even though they're not technically father and son. Now, you do have some time pass by where apparently you have most of the members of X-Force being kicked outside so that Cannonball and also Cable and a couple of other people at X-Force are able to have a conversation with one another in private. Now, for Richter, he hates the idea that he's one of the ones that got kicked out of the actual meeting. He feels like that everybody should be part of the actual meeting. Now, you do have Shatterstar trying his best to understand that sometimes your leaders need to have that private convo when it comes to planning out things for the future of the team. And sometimes those soldiers are not going to be involved in those plannings. And so for Richter, he hates the idea that he's just not involved in those meetings. And really, it's not one of those meetings at all. Instead, it's really more of Cable and Cannonball and a few other people coming together to figure out if there is a way to save the life of Skid and also Fire Fist. I don't know why it says save the life, but really more of fixing their brains. And let me explain. You see, these two characters, they were also part of the New Mutants at the very tail end of the run of New Mutants leading into X-Force. They were really part of X-Factor at the very beginning of the original team of X-Factor. They were trainees for the original team who then moved on over to the New Mutants. Either way, when it came to Skid and Fire Fist, they were actually captured by Strife and brainwashed to work for him. And so right now, you have Cable and really everyone else in that room just trying to find the best way to fix their brains, to bring those two characters back over to their side. Now for Sunspot, and really Cannonball as well, especially Cannonball, he still cannot trust Cable. He wants to know the full story of Cable. Now, when it comes to Cable, when he does give us this quick origin story, it's only like small details, and really later books down the road is going to give us some more information about the actual character. But for right now, all we know is that for Nathan Dayspring, that's his real name, he was brought into the future by a woman known as the Ascani. Now, when it came to her, she believed that he could be used as a way to be their savior, to save that dark future that was created by Apocalypse. The problem was him and his crew, they had failed in the war. They lost the war against Apocalypse and his people. And so you had Cable go back in time to try to prevent that future from actually happening. But he also believed that Cannonball will be the best person to kind of use to help prevent that future from actually happening. And the reason why, because for Cannonball, he's one of the few people to be trained by both Charles Xavier, but also Magneto. The problem was that for Cable, when he came back in time, so did Strife. And that kind of ruined his entire plan. And so he tells all of that over to Cannonball and the rest of X-Force, who's also in the room with them. And they're kind of like, oh, that's a lot. And it does seem like you're telling the truth here. Now, because Cable has traveled so much in the time stream, he does not actually know what is the actual future for the main Marvel universe. All he knows is that he came from a future where Apocalypse had basically ruled. Now, with all that being said, you did have Cable say, listen, it seems like we have an intruder at your base, so let's go outside to see who is this unknown person trying to attack the base. Now, once everybody get outside, they realize that they're being confronted by Exodus. Now, when it comes to Exodus, this is not his first time appearing in our coverage. And matter of fact, he first appeared in the first chapter of Fatal Attractions. Now, in that first chapter, he just flew by X-Factor and went on with his day. We had no idea who he was. But now, this is the starting point in our coverage over the X-Men where we are going to learn more about the actual character Exodus. And really, we're going to learn that he has a range of different kinds of powers under his belt. And so over our coverage over the X-Men, we are going to learn about a lot of different powers this one character truly has. Now, the reason why he is here is to actually make an offer over to X-Force, to have them join him over to a place he calls heaven. Now, really, he's not here for the entire team. He's only here for two people, Cannonball and also Sunspot. And the reason why, because he believes if he takes them back over to his place, this place called heaven, and they like the place, then maybe, just maybe, the rest of X-Force will actually join them on this place called heaven. And so you have Cannonball and Sunspot kind of down with the idea of going with them, but at the same time, they don't want to go alone. And he says, listen, if we go with you, we got to bring everybody who is part of the New Mutants. Now remember, when it came to the New Mutants, the original series led into X-Force, but at the tail end of that series was when you had Cable take over the team. Now, when he did, over time, we saw different members of the New Mutants begin to leave and new characters came in to replace them to make up X-Force. And so right now, you have all the characters on X-Force who were part of the New Mutants going with Exodus over to this place called Heaven, while the rest of the team stayed behind. So you have like Richter, Sunspot, Boom Boom, Cannonball, Skid, and also Fire Fist. Now the last two characters, they're only going because Exodus believes that his master can actually cure the mind of both Fire Fist and Skid. Now, before you have Cannonball leave, he walks over to Cable. And the reason why? To give Cable a tracking device, to give Cable and his team the ability to track down Cannonball and his team as they all leave with Exodus. And so just like that, they're all gone to this place supposedly called Heaven. Now, when our heroes arrive at this place supposedly called Heaven, they realize that this is actually the Gray Malkin, but apparently the Gray Malkin has been repaired. Now, if you saw our earlier videos when it comes to X-Force, you would know that X-Force had, well, really Cannonball, had no choice but to go ahead and blow up the Gray Malkin, the old base that belonged to Cable. Now remember, when it comes to Gray Malkin, it is Cable's base, but the reason why it's so special because it was the thing he brought with him when he traveled from the future back into the past. And he thought he lost the Gray Malkin when he came back to the past again, hearing that it had blown up. But in our last video, we saw somebody being able to rebuild the Gray Malkin. Now, honestly, we already know it is Magneto, but for our heroes, they begin to realize that yes, they're on the Gray Malkin, but somebody was able to actually rebuild it. Now, they are confronted by somebody who's hiding underneath a robe. We already know it's Magneto, like the last video showed Magneto. But you do have Magneto go out of his way to fix the mind of both Fire Fist and Skid. And so right now, they're back to normal again, no longer brainwashed by strife. Now, like we saw earlier, when it came to Cannonball, he gave Cable the ability to actually track them where they went to. And so you had Cable be able to get an aircraft that could actually travel into space. And when they do, you have Cable find out what has happened, that somebody has rebuilt the Gray Malkin. Now, for Cable, he has no idea it's Magneto, but us, the readers, we already know it is Magneto. But either way, for Cable, he hates the idea to see his home, his old home, now being used or possibly going to be used against him, but also possibly could be a home for the mutant race. Now, there is a reason why I'm saying a home for the mutant race, and I'll explain why here in a moment, but getting back over to Cannonball and his team, you have Magneto realize that, hey, listen, there seemed to be some kind of intruder here. And it looks like it's Cable and his team, so I'm kind of confused how they got here. And you have Cannonball say, hey, it was me. I had a tracker on me. They followed the tracker, and now they are here. Now, for Magneto, he's very impressed in what Cannonball has done. And really, it kind of shows that Magneto realized that Cannonball has grown up. He's no longer that young child he took in back in the New Mutant days. But getting back over to Cable's team, we do see that Cable's team has arrived at the Gray Malkin. Now, for Cable, he has a game plan here. He wants to hack into the Gray Malkin. And the reason why, because he wants to teleport. He wants to body slide. Now, remember, the Gray Malkin gives Cable the ability to teleport across the entire world, but also on the Gray Malkin. It's called body sliding. Either way, for Cable, he wants to hack into the Gray Malkin, but also hack into the Professor. Now remember, the Professor is the AI system that helped Cable control the Gray Malkin, but he has no idea the Professor has been infected by new alien tech that Magneto has uploaded into the Professor's program. Either way, for Cable, he was able to teleport over to where Cannonball and his team is actually at. Well, really, before you have Cable being able to actually teleport over to where Cannonball and his team is at, you do have our heroes fight against Exodus. And really, that battle is short-lived. And the only reason why, because, well, you have Cable being able to actually teleport them over to where Cannonball is at and get away, far away from Exodus. Now, like I said a moment ago, when it came to Magneto, he's calling his new base the Avalon, but like I said, he's trying to make this place be more like the heaven for the mutant race, and Earth is the hell for the mutant race. Let me explain. Because for Magneto, he realized that if mutants try to stay on Earth, then most likely they are going to be hunted down. They are going to be killed off by the human race. So why should they stay down there on Earth in a place that's like hell? When they come over to the Avalon and live in a place that's like heaven. And so it's Magneto saying, why don't you guys stay here with me? A better place for the mutant race. Now for Skid and Fire Fist, they had decided to go ahead and stay on Avalon. And the reason why, because Magneto had fixed their mind. They're kind of like, hey, listen, he fixed our mind, but also he's kind of right. Why don't we just go ahead and stay here on Avalon? It's basically heaven for the mutant race. Now for Cable, he's kind of like, y'all are children. Y'all don't fully understand what Magneto choices could possibly do to the mutant race down the road. But it's really more Cannonball saying, no, you don't understand, Cable. Like, we don't have the right to force people to do what we want them to do. They have their own free will. They can make their own choices. If Skid and Fire Fist want to stay here, they can do that. Now for Cable, he hates hearing that from Cannonball. But Cable's like, listen, my main goal right now is to get rid of the Gray Malkin. I want to blow it up. I hate the idea it's right now in Magneto's hand. But also, I want to download my AI system, the Professor, and get the heck out of here. And so, he basically forced body slide the entire X-Force team on the aircraft that he used to get over here to the Gray Malkin, or the Avalon is what Magneto is calling it now. And then he runs away to hopefully achieve his goal, to blow up Avalon, but to download the Professor. Now, while you have Cable trying to achieve these goals, he's then confronted by Magneto. Now, for Magneto, it was more of like, listen, I was not trying to battle you here. And matter of fact, I was just trying to give or build a safe haven for the mutant race, away from the human race who hate us so much. But here you are right now trying to bring me down. Now for Cable, it's more of like, listen, I have been through the timeline so many times that I have seen what happens when you have decided to do things for the mutant race. It causes so many problems for the mutant race. I have seen it over and over and over again in the timeline. And so yes, if I had to stop you here and now to save the lives of future mutants down the road, then I'm going to do it here and now. But here's the problem though. Half the body of Cable is metal. So for Magneto, it's just like, there you go. Listen, you tried, but listen, dude, I'm Magneto. I'm on a whole different level. You're like here, I'm up here. There's no way you thought that you could actually defeat me. But then you have Cable still being able to teleport away, to body slide the heck out of there. But at least he was able to get the Professor. Now, for Magneto, he realized that he wasn't really able to recruit enough members of X-Force. Now, remember, in the earlier parts of this video, I had mentioned the fact that for Magneto, he called the New Mutants or X-Force the second generation. And the reason why, because, well, they were the second team for the X-Men after Uncanny X-Men. When it came to Chris Claremont, the Uncanny X-Men were more adults, but then later on he introduced the New Mutants who were young teenagers, the second generation. But either way, for Magneto, he's kind of like, listen, I was not really able to get more members of X-Force, but now it's time for me to try to recruit the other members of the X-Men, the first generation of the mutant race that works under Charles Xavier. And what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. And as you all know right now, we are currently covering Fatal Attractions. Now, we have already covered the first two chapters of this six-part crossover between all the X-teens like X-Force, X-Factor, both X-Men teens, and of course Excalibur as well, including Wolverine as well. But today, we're going to focus on Chapter 3 that takes place in Uncanny X-Men issue number 304. Now, for me and most fans of the X-Men, this is the moment where we can officially say kicks off Fatal Attractions. Because the first two chapters of Fatal Attraction kind of like solo chapters for two of the X teams, X Factor and X Force. The rest of the teams were not really officially affected by those two chapters. X Factor had to deal with the idea of being lied to by Val Cooper. And when it came to X Force, well, Cable got messed up by Magneto. Now, you could technically say that the Magneto part in X Force does lead into the later chapters of Fatal Attractions, but we're now officially picking up with the war between Magneto and Charles Xavier. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. But as we get into the third chapter of Fatal Attractions, we actually pick up with Fabian Cortez being attacked by his fellow Acolytes. Now remember, when it came to Fabian Cortez, he was the person who kind of killed off Magneto in the earlier part of the X-Men in the 1990s. Now the reason why he did that, because he was trying to use Magneto as a martyr to kind of inspire people to join his side, but to also attack the human race. Now, we also had learned that for Fabian Cortez, he also killed off Magneto because he was part of the Upstart organization. Now, remember, the Upstart organization was a group of people who played this very sick game where they would go after other people around the world to receive points. People who were mostly mutants or at least had powers. Now, if you killed off a character that was really powerful, well, you receive more points than usual. And so when it came to Fabian Cortez, when he had killed off Magneto, he hit two goals. One, getting more people on his side, but two, he had received a lot of points in the Upstart organization. Now, when it came to our last few X-Men videos, he found out that Magneto is not dead. And so for him, it's the beginning of his downfall. He lost all those points he had originally because he believed he killed off Magneto, but also because the Acolytes found out that he lied, that technically it was him who killed off Magneto, but also Magneto is alive. Now, the way the Acolytes are finding out is because of Exodus. Now, you see my last couple videos for Fatal Attractions. All we know right now for Exodus is that he's this powerful mutant, and over time in our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to learn about all the different powers he may have. But right now, he is Magneto's right-hand man. And he's all like, hey guys, listen, that man right there, he lied to you. Magneto is alive. And matter of fact, he's offering you guys a home away from hell, away from Earth, on his new base in space, Avalon. So why not come with me to live a better life away from that traitor? Now, I want to jump over to Charles Xavier. And the reason why, because for Charles Xavier and the rest of the X-Men, really all the X teams, they're kind of dealing with the idea of the death of Illyana, the little sister to Colossus. Now, we all know that for Colossus, the 90s were really rough for the character. And the reason why, because he lost his brother to suicide, he lost his parents thanks to the Russian government, and now he lost his sister too, well, the legacy virus that was put out in the world thanks to strife. But for Charles Xavier, with the death of Illyana, he feels like a huge failure. Now, for Charles Xavier, it's really more the idea that there have been other mutants under his watch that had officially died, or while he was away, that had also officially died. And so he feels like right now he's failing the mutant race. But also, he kind of feels like he's alone. Now, technically, he is not. But for Charles Xavier, it's only him who could possibly lead the mutant race into a better future. Nobody else. The X-Men are just helping out, but he's the man who has to lead that mission into the dream he wants to achieve. Now, really, you have Illyandra appear, his space girlfriend, and also the leader of the Shi'ar Empire. And she realized that Charles Xavier is going through a lot, but she also realized that Charles feels alone. And so it's her just trying her best to comfort her man, say, you're not alone. I'm here for you. You have the X-Men. You are not alone. But for Charles, he still feels like he is alone because it's up to him to save the mutant race. Now, when it comes to Magneto, he's also kind of feeling the same way as Charles Xavier, but there's some things different about the two characters. And what I mean by that statement is that for Magneto, he truly believes that he's the only savior for the mutant race, but he's not trying to achieve the same goal as Charles Xavier, the whole idea that mutants and humans can live together. For Magneto, he already knows it's not really possible. But on top of that, for Magneto, he's being motivated because he has seen the death of many young mutants across the world, but also because of his daughter. Now remember, by this point in Marvel Comics, for Magneto, he only had 3 kids: Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and also Anya. Now, Anya was his first daughter, his first child. Now, you're probably like, hey, wait, what about Polaris? They had not discovered the whole idea that Magneto was the father to Polaris until a few more years after this story arc right here. But for right now, let's just focus on Anya. Now, Anya was the first child of Magneto and Magda. Now, when it came to Anya, she had died unfortunately in a fire. Now, when it came to that fire, Magneto was trying his best to go back in there and save his daughter after being able to save his wife. But unfortunately, he was attacked by a mob of people, a mob of human beings. And so, unfortunately, he had to watch his daughter die in that fire. Now, for you guys out there kind of wondering, like I was when it came to the Krakoa era of X-Men comics, and if they had the ability to bring her back to life, they did not. And the reason why, because we kind of find out that Anya was not a mutant at all. She was a regular human being. And that was a big thing when it came to the Krakoa era of X-Men comics. The whole idea of bringing back dead mutants. You had to be a mutant. Either way, getting back to Fatal Attractions, for Magneto, watching his daughter die, but also other people die by the hands of the different humans across the world, it's just so hard for him to deal with. And so it's him saying, like, it's up to me to lead the mutant race into a better future, leading into that war between him and Charles Xavier. Now, I kind of want to jump over to Kitty Pryde and Storm, and there's a good reason why, because over the years up to this point in the X-Men timeline, Kitty Pryde was kind of like the daughter for Storm, and Storm was kind of like the mother for Kitty Pryde. They had a very close bond for one another, and really, you could also say that Wolverine was kind of like the father to Kitty Pryde, as she was a daughter of many for Wolverine. But either way, for Kitty Pryde, she's kind of upset because she feels like if they were normal, none of this would happen to them. The idea of Cypher being killed off back in New Mutants, the idea of Thunderbird dying back in the early days of X-Men comics, the idea of Liana now dying just only a few weeks ago. It's the whole idea that they're trying to achieve this goal for the mutant race, for the human race as well, but the problem is they're not getting close to that goal. Instead, the bodies are just piling up. And so for Storm, it's more of, hey, you know what? Let's have a little chat, Kitty Pryde. Let me talk to you a tad bit why I feel like it's great to be a mutant no matter what. Because for Storm, it's really more saying, even though the dead bodies are piling up, even though they've been battling against so many different groups out there across the world, you always have to look at the brighter side of things. Because even though the war is long, we're still winning small battles here and there. And those small battles, they're also piling up, which means that our goal may sooner or later come to reach. And that will be a great thing when it finally comes. Now, I want to jump over to Colossus because for Colossus, like I said, this man has been dealing with a lot. The whole idea of losing his sister, but also his brother thanks to suicide, his parents thanks to the Russian government. Like for Colossus, this was probably the worst time for him being an X-Men in the 1990s. And so you have Kitty Pryde and Storm realize that for Colossus, he's burning all his paintings, just getting rid of every single thing he had painted over the years. Because to him, there's no point in his life anymore. Now, also because for Colossus, he's having a hard time kind of controlling his feelings. And the reason why, because there was a story on accident had skipped over where he had fought against a character known as the Executioner. And Colossus got a tad bit damaged. And so he has a dent in his head. And that dent in his head is somewhat kind of affecting him on how he actually acts when it comes to his feelings. Either way, for Kitty Pryde, she realized that the man she loved when she was younger is kind of just cold now. He does not want to bond with anybody because this man has now lost his entire family in a short period of time. Now, for me, the next couple of pages are kind of hinting at the idea that we're getting another X team, a new team that's kind of like the New Mutants, but not being called the New Mutants. And that would be Generation X. And the reason why I'm saying that, because you have Bishop having a hard time understanding the whole idea of a funeral, because apparently in his future, they didn't have funerals. And so you have Banshee trying his best to explain things to Bishop, but also you have Bishop mention the fact that for Banshee, there was a point where down the road, he would actually become the last hope for the next generation. And just like that, it's the book saying like, hey guys, listen, we already have like 4 or 5 teams, but what if we had another team out there, but being led by Banshee? And so it's kind of saying like, hey, coming soon, coming soon. Right now, just these teams right here who are going to attend the funeral. Now, when it comes to Illyana's funeral, you have all the different X teams. You have X-Men, you have Excalibur, X-Force, X-Factor. Like everyone is there to, celebrate the life of Illyana. But then it kind of leads into the idea of Charles Xavier wanting to have this conversation with Colossus, see how he's dealing with the fact that now he lost another family member. But this is going to be Colossus just going off on Charles Xavier. Because for Colossus, it was Charles Xavier who kind of promised him the idea of, if you help me try to achieve the goal of mutants and humans living together in harmony, that everything will be great for you and your family as well. And so it's Colossus saying, your words had yanked me away from my family. It was your words that put me on this path. It was your words that had me believe in your dream. But now I lost my brother. I lost my parents. I lost my sister. I have lost everything because of you, Charles Xavier. Now, while you have Colossus just going off on Charles Xavier, Magneto arrives. Now, for Magneto, for him being here, it's more of a statement. Like, yes, he may have crashed the funeral for Illyana, but it's really more of Magneto saying, no, I came here because I am tired of seeing our people die. I am tired of the young mutants who are younger than me and Charles Xavier, dying in front of my eyes left and right because of different things, like the different factions out there for the different organizations who want to kill off the mutant race, the different fractions out there of mutants who are hurting other mutants. I am tired of this virus that's going around killing off mutants left and right one by one. It's time for me, Charles, to pick up where you have fell off at. It's time for me to lead our people into salvation. And so it's Magneto saying, I didn't come here to fight you guys. No, I came here to offer you guys a better life, a better chance to actually survive. And so you have Magneto use his powers to make sure that no one is able to move so that they are able to listen to his words. Now, for Quicksilver, he does kind of hate the Acolytes because if you saw my coverage over the chapter for X Factor when it came to Fatal Attractions, well, there was a moment where you had the Acolytes went to a hospital, really more a hospice care for people who are on the verge of death. And so with that, you have the Acolytes kill off every single person in that facility. And so for Quicksilver, it's all like, how can you take the Acolytes back to your side, Father, for what they have done? They have killed off innocent humans who are on the verge of death. Now, for Magneto, he does kind of believe that the people that had died were not completely innocent. But at the same time, he does agree for what the Acolytes have done was completely wrong. And so you have Magneto actually kill off one of the members of the Acolytes who were part of that crime. And that would be Senyaka. Now, when it comes to Senyaka, he'll die in this chapter right here, but he'll come back down the road in later parts of our coverage over the X-Men. Now, with all that being said, is Magneto showing Quicksilver like, no, I do not agree for what they have done. But you also have to realize it was not me who had told the Acolytes to kill off those humans. It was Fabian Cortez when he was the one in charge. But then you have Magneto show the X-Men his new home, his new fortress, and that would be Avalon. Now, this is a huge moment. And the reason why, because you have Charles Xavier realize that Magneto was able to build this base by using Shi'ar technology, the technology that Charles left behind when he left the X-Men in charge of Magneto. There was a brief moment in time where Magneto was the actual leader of the X-Men. Matter of fact, he was the master, the headmaster of Charles Xavier School when Charles left to go spend time with Illyana. And so with that happening, it gave Magneto the ability to get that Shi'ar technology, but also parts of the Gray Malkin that had belonged to Cable's old base, put it together to make a fortress. Now for Magneto, he's calling this heaven for the mutant race because Earth is hell, but heaven is this place away from all the bad things happening on Earth. And so Charles realized that it was his fault that Magneto was able to build this base with Shi'ar technology. Now, this leads into the moment where you technically have the X-Men being able to fight back against Magneto finally. And really, it's all because of Bishop. Let me explain. You see, Bishop has the ability to absorb energy. And so the entire time while you have Magneto using his power to get the X-Men at bay, well, his powers is also being used against Bishop, a form of energy that Bishop was able to absorb. And once you have Bishop be fully charged, he is able to release that energy right back at Magneto, sending him flying across the home of Charles Xavier, giving the X-Men the ability to finally move again. Now, for Magneto, he truly does blame the human race for the whole idea of the legacy virus. Now, we already know the legacy virus came from strife, but it's really more Magneto saying it was the humans that kind of pushed Strife into that direction. It was the humans that led a Strife become the man he was, the man who decided to go ahead and release the legacy virus across the world. Now, you do have Rogue trying her best to use her powers as a way to stop Magneto, but the problem is that Magneto is so strong that even though Rogue took a portion of his power, really half his powers, he's still so powerful that he was able to take her down. Now for Bishop, he was able to receive more energy from the different members of the X-Men. And so right now they're trying to use that energy as a way to beat down on Magneto. Now for Magneto, he's technically in a tight bind right now because he's trying to use his powers as a way to protect himself, but also use his powers as a way to hold up Avalon. Either way, after a few more pages, you then have Colossus attack Bishop from behind because Colossus is actually going to join Magneto's side. Because for Colossus, he has now officially lost his trust in the dream of Charles Xavier. He lost his trust in the man who made him an X-Men, Charles Xavier. It's him wondering what is the other side like. And so it's Colossus leaving the X-Men and joining the side of Magneto. Now, the ending of this chapter is really more of Charles Xavier and Magneto kind of hashing it out with one another because it's Charles Xavier kind of realized that the man he called a best friend many years ago is long gone. Now, for Magneto, he believes that man had never existed. The man that Charles met was a false version of Magneto. That right now we're seeing right here is the real version of Magneto. Either way, you do have Charles Xavier use his powers as a way to force the powers of Magneto to send Avalon in Magneto back into space. And you have Charles fall down in the sky and having Archangel catch him. Now that is the end for this chapter of Fatal Attractions, but we still have 3 more chapters to cover. In those 3 other chapters, things are gonna get a whole lot crazier. But with that being said, guys, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we're currently covering Fatal Attractions. And with us covering Fatal Attractions, it's time for us to dive back into the main storyline once again. And we pick up with the 4th chapter, X-Men issue number 25. Now, this is really important because this is the moment where you have Magneto ripping off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. And for the next few years in Marvel Comics, Wolverine would be almost completely different. A character where most fans were not really a fan of because the way he looked and the way he acted. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video, but other videos down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, this is a very huge moment as well for Magneto because it's going to lead into the Onslaught saga down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. But getting into today's issue, and so as we dive into the first page for today's video, we do pick out all the different nations around the world who are coming together to decide what to do when it comes to Magneto. Should they use the Magneto Protocol? Now, the Magneto Protocol is very important for today's video, but also because when it came to Magneto in the earlier parts of our coverage over Fatal Attractions, we saw that Magneto was able to build a base called Avalon out in space, floating right over the earth. And so for a lot of nations out there, they were kind of worried about the idea that Magneto might try to use that space base as a way to attack the different nations who were going against Magneto and what he was trying to achieve for the mutant race. And so now they're trying to use the Magneto protocol as a way to protect the Earth, but to hopefully keep him away from Earth from the time being. Now, for the United Nations, they do have a good idea of how to keep Magneto away from the Earth. You see, they had all these different satellites around the Earth, and these different satellites were being used as a way to build up some kind of force field around the Earth. Not a force field, but some kind of field around the Earth that would cancel out the powers of Magneto. So if he tries to come back to Earth, his powers are not going to work at all because he will be inside that field that they had built up. And so for Magneto, it really does tick him off. But here's the thing, for Magneto, he's not trying to go to war against the human race. For him, all he wants to do is take different mutants around the world and bring them back over to Avalon, his space station base. He just wants to give the mutant race a new home away from the human race as a way to protect them. But now with his field being around the Earth, Magneto is no longer able to go back down to Earth to get more mutants and bring them over to Avalon, because if he tries, his powers are not going to work. And so you have Magneto say, fine, if you're going to try to cancel out me, I am now going to try to cancel out you. And so he releases a EMP across the entire world. Like I said, this EMP is affecting the entire world. For example, we jump over to the Fantastic Four, and you have Ben Grimm getting upset because he believes that Reed was playing some kind of trick on him, but then he realized that no, Reed's right now freaking out because Reed is wondering who in the world had just released that kind of powerful pulse across the entire world. We know who it is, but they have no idea. And the trend continues on because we then jump over to Japan and we see Sunfire realizing what is happening across the entire world and also his country as well. We jump over to Great Britain and we pick up with Excalibur for Captain Britain and Nightcrawler. They're also being affected by this EMP that Magneto had just released across the entire world. And so with the entire world being affected by this EMP, of course it gets back over to the X-Men. And so you have the X-Men be lucky, as some places are, to have a second generator to use as a backup, but to also bring their power back online. But now the X-Men know who had done it. And so this leads into a meeting between both the gold team and the blue team of the X-Men. Now, before we dive into this meeting, I want to shift our focus over to Charles Xavier, because for Charles Xavier, this is a man who's kind of now believing in the idea of going down the path of Magneto. And what I mean by that statement is that for Charles Xavier, he's still trying to achieve the goals of mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony, but at the same time, still trying to lead the mutant race into a better place. But for Magneto, who's also trying to lead the mutant race into a better place, the two guys are both trying to achieve that goal, but in different ways. And so for Charles Xavier, he is slowly becoming like Magneto with the idea of go ahead and crossing that line as a way to achieve the different goals that he has set for himself. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, because as we dive into this meeting and you have the X-Men say, like, listen, Magneto had released an EMP basically across the entire world. And you had trains, planes crashing all over the world, killing countless lives because Magneto was angry for what the UN had did using the Magneto protocols. And so now it's the X-Men saying there is a war possibly coming very soon. And so the X-Men must step in and stop the war coming before more lives are lost. But for Charles Xavier, it really seems like he is okay with the possibility of crossing that line to protect the world, to stop Magneto. So for the X-Men, they're trying to build up a game plan. But for Charles Xavier, this is a man who had already built a game plan up. First, he says, I am going on this mission because he was able to get a Shi'ar exoskeleton suit to use as a way to walk around, but he has to use his psychic abilities to make the suit actually work. But either way, for Charles Xavier, we could tell this man had already put a team together and a plan together. So for example, he's going to bring Wolverine and Gambit. And the reason why, because those two guys are great when it comes to being stealthy. But then on top of that, it'll be him and Jean Grey. They need both powerful psychics to attack the mind of Magneto as a way to attack him. But then you have Charles bringing in Rogue and also Quicksilver. Now, here's the reason why, because these are two characters who have feelings towards Magneto. Quicksilver, the son of Magneto, and Rogue, not officially an ex-lover just yet, but she did have some hard feelings for Magneto that did not reach the potential of the two characters getting together. But it's way to say, if I can bring in these two characters who have some connection to Magneto, I could use that as a way to bring him down to a defensive position so I'm able to attack his mind in a better position. Now, when they do arrive on Avalon, you have the X-Men being able to sneak on. Now, here's the thing. We have to remember that when it came to the earlier parts of Fatal Attractions, Colossus had joined Magneto. Now, for Colossus, it was really more because this man lost his entire family. His brother committed suicide. His parents were killed off by the Russian government. And then his sister died by the legacy virus. It's him saying like, I was on your side, Charles Xavier, trying to help you reach your goals. But unfortunately, with me trying to do that, I had lost my entire family in a short period of time. And so it's him kind of believing that Magneto might be a better answer for the mutant race. But it seems like Colossus is still working for the X-Men. And the reason why, because it seems like he is able to turn off all the different security systems in Avalon to make sure that those systems cannot detect the X-Men who had just teleported onto Avalon, to allow them the chance to sneak around the entire base. Now, before we are able to kind of see the X-Men begin to attack Magneto in his base, you have our heroes run into two characters, Fire Fist and Skid. Now, we have talked a lot about these characters in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men when we were covering the Mutant Massacre, Follow the Mutants, Inferno, because they did play some bigger roles in those comic events when it came to the X-Men, because they were part of X Factor. They were the trainees of X Factor in the early days of that comic book series. But by this point in the coverage over the X-Men, they kind of fell off completely. And so they're kind of just used as a way to move stories along. And that's really it. Like, for example, you have our heroes run into Fire Fist and Skid. Now, the last time our heroes had heard about these two characters, they had been brainwashed by Strife, and they were on his side back in the Executioner song. But their minds was cured by Magneto. Now, here's the thing, because for Fire Fist and also Skid, our heroes still believe in the possibility that maybe they're still brainwashed. But you have our two young heroes saying, no, we're not brainwashed. We truly believe that Magneto might be the best thing for the mutant race. Now, before you have the X-Men be able to debate against these two young mutants, you have Charles Xavier use his powers to put them to sleep because they have to move on with their mission. But now it's time for us to get into the plan of the X-Men. So for Charles Xavier, what he did was he sent Quicksilver out to put a disk inside the main computer of Avalon. Here's the reason why, because now with the main computer being under control by Charles Xavier, he's then able to begin to teleport different members of Magneto's Acolytes off Avalon to kind of only leave Magneto by himself and maybe just a few members of the Acolytes to make things easier for the X-Men. But here comes the problem. You see, as soon as our heroes had did that, Magneto realized what was happening. Magneto realized this was an attack done by the X-Men. And so this man just rips a hole through Avalon to find the X-Men, and this begins the battle between our heroes and their number one enemy. Now, the first 2 pages of this battle I truly love because you have Wolverine thinking like, you know what? I can take Magneto down by myself. I don't need any help at all. And you have Magneto like, really? You believe that you have the ability to bring me down? Wrong. And send Wolverine flying away easily. Now, for Rogue, it's more of like, listen, she was somebody he was very close to. He actually cared for, maybe even loved. And so it's kind of like, can Rogue bring Magneto down to make him realize that what he is doing is completely wrong? Yeah, no. For Magneto, this is the man who's too driven right now to just give up on his goals. And so he sends Rogue away as well. Now you do have Gambit being able to hit Magneto right in the face to then allow Charles Xavier and also Jean Grey to begin doing work on his mind. Now, what Charles Xavier and Jean Grey are trying to do, it seems like, is to have Magneto relive different moments of his past. But here's the thing. What they're trying to do is to help him recognize that the past is the past. Like, let it go. It happened in the past and you have to move on. But they're also trying to show Magneto everything he did wrong in the past to kind of help him realize the path he had taken many years ago was the wrong path to take. And so they're hoping that this could possibly work. But now we have to shift our focus over to Quicksilver. Because Charles Xavier realized that for Quicksilver, he is something he could use to attack the mind of Magneto as well. Because as Magneto, he has failed as a father for 3 different people. Now remember, we don't technically know just yet that Polaris is also the daughter of Magneto. They have not revealed that just yet. For right now, in this timeline for Marvel, he only had 3 kids. Anya, who died in the past, Quicksilver, and the Scarlet Witch. But it's Quicksilver saying, look at what I have become. It's because the way you tried to raise me. It's the way you tried to be a father to me. And now here I am, a man who's not really able to be with his wife and his daughter. And let's not forget, back over in X Factor, that was a big thing. It was Quicksilver trying to hopefully repair his family, bring them back together, to be with his wife, to be with his daughter. But unfortunately, they can't do it because the way he is, because of Magneto, because he's trying to run away from his past, run away from his connections to his father, who's not a good man at all. But for Magneto, it's all like, listen, I'm being attacked in many different ways, but I gotta stay focused. And so now it's Magneto possibly thinking of killing off his son for going against him. But luckily for Quicksilver, you have Wolverine jump back into the battle. Now, for Wolverine, he understands what's happening here. Magneto is very serious about killing off his son. And because Wolverine is great with stealth, he was able to sneak up on Magneto and cut him across his chest. Now, at first, we don't see any blood because I guess the comic code back then, but like, hey, come on now. We already know the man got messed up by Wolverine claws. But for Magneto, he's not down yet. And so he knows he has to make he knows he has to make Wolverine pay. Sorry for that. But this is the moment where it changes a lot for Wolverine and later comics when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, but also for other X books as well. Because you didn't have Magneto rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine just like that. And Charles Xavier gets very angry to see what Magneto has done to one of his X-Men. And so for Charles Xavier, enough is enough. He's tired of the killing. He's tired of the battles against Magneto. And so you have Charles Xavier say, you know what? That's it. I'm going to take your mind away. And so we see Charles Xavier being able to do that. And it seems like that Magneto has now fallen into a state where he's technically in a coma. That's it. He's gone. Magneto has lost his mind thanks to Charles Xavier. Now, the book kind of ends on the note where you have Colossus appear. Now, remember, Colossus was the one who brought down a security system on Avalon to allow the X-Men to sneak on. But for Colossus, he's still on Magneto's side. He's all like, listen, I have lost my entire family. Somebody gotta be here to help out Magneto, to take care of him, because right now he's in a state where he's not able to take care of himself. And so you have the X-Men leave, thanks to Bishop flying the Blackbird up there, and hopefully they can save the lives of Charles Xavier and also Wolverine. But this ends today's video for this chapter of Fatal Attractions, as we now move into the next chapter, which is Wolverine issue number 75, the 5th chapter of Fatal Attractions. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. As you all know, we are currently covering Fatal Attractions. Now, we already covered the first 4 chapters of this crossover, but now it's time for us to get into the 5th chapter, and this will be Wolverine issue number 75. Now, here's the thing. This entire issue is kind of where we basically see an entire change in the character of Wolverine, but also for some people out there, this was the last issue they had collected when it came to Wolverine, because after this point, he goes through a complete change and fans were not really happy about the idea of the way they were going with Wolverine. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video and also other videos down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, for the 5th chapter of Fatal Attractions, it does pick up where the last chapter left off at. And remember, for the last chapter, we saw Magneto rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. And so right now, his healing factor has gone into overdrive. It's trying to repair all the damage that was done to his body thanks to Magneto. Now, with all that being said, let's also not forget that our heroes had defeated Magneto on his space base Avalon. Now, Bishop was able to bring a modified version of the Blackbird to get those heroes off the base and try to bring them down to Earth. The problem is that the Blackbird was not really made for re-entry. So right now, the Blackbird is slowly falling apart. But you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to access the mind of Wolverine to keep him somewhat sane. And the reason why, because all the pain he's going through at the moment, thanks to Magneto, is bringing back all the bad memories in his mind all at once. And that could cause some serious damage to the mind of Wolverine. And so for Jean Grey, she feels like they should just go ahead and erase all these bad things in his mind that had happened to him. But for Charles, he says, no, you can't do that, because all of these bad moments in his mind, they're part of his personality. They're part of him. If you try to get rid of that, it could completely change him or possibly break his mind. So unfortunately, we have to sit here and to make sure that all these different bad memories do not come together all at once to break the mind of Wolverine. Now, I should tell you that when it comes to this issue, we're going to jump back and forth with the whole idea of Bishop and the rest of the X-Men, minus Charles Xavier and Jean Grey, trying to keep the Blackbird together long enough so they're able to land safely, while you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to work on the mind of Wolverine. So we see our heroes doing everything they can to just keep the Blackbird together, but it seems like every single time they get one thing handled, something else just pops off when it comes to the Blackbird. It's Bishop panicking. We're kind of left to believe in the possibility that our heroes are going to die. Now, you do have Charles Xavier call out for more Taggart on the radio. Here's the reason why. Because for Charles Xavier, thanks to his battle with Magneto in the last chapter, the man is almost completely drained of energy. And so this is Charles Xavier calling out to Moore saying, listen, I need you to talk me through all the different things I need to do when it comes to medical stuff to keep Wolverine alive, while I try my best to use my energy to keep his mind together. Now, while you have those two characters talking, Jubilee is in the room. Let's not forget that back in the 70s and 80s, Kitty Pryde was more the sidekick to Wolverine. She was kind of like the daughter for Storm and Wolverine. They were like her mother and father. But in the 90s, she left, went over to Excalibur, and then left the door open for somebody else to take that role. And there came Jubilee. And so Jubilee is hearing the possibility that Wolverine might die. And so she's wondering if there's any way he could possibly survive. Now, I kind of hate to repeat myself, but we got to jump back over to the rest of the X-Men who are trying to keep the Blackbird together. And the reason why I want to call back over to that, because this is a callback to the Phoenix Saga. Because as you have our heroes on the Blackbird trying to re-enter the Earth, they're going through a radiation storm like they did back in the Phoenix Saga. And of course, as we all know, the X-Men back then was Jean Grey trying her best to keep the spaceship together to protect her friends and her lover Cyclops. Now, back then, it did lead into her supposedly turning into the Phoenix until some retcons happened. But either way, for our heroes, they're going through another radiation storm. And so while going through that, the other X-Men who are back at the X-Mansion, like Cyclops, he's freaking out because he's having flashbacks to what happened to Jean Grey back then. He believes that she is going to die once again while trying to survive this whole idea of going through another radiation storm. But for Charles Xavier, while trying to work on the mind of Wolverine, it's Wolverine going through or reliving the worst moments of his past. The whole idea of Weapon X, Magneto ripping off the adamantium off his bones. It's Wolverine having a hard time just trying to keep his mind together. And Charles right now is trying his best to keep Wolverine's mind together. But for Wolverine, he then tells Charles that he hears music. It's all the people that he had loved in the past who had died singing to him, calling out to him. Now for Charles, he knows what that means. It's basically death calling out for Wolverine. Is Wolverine on the verge of dying? It's Charles saying, Logan, don't go that way. You are going to die. But for Logan, he wants to die. He wants to go ahead and just move on his life and go over to the afterlife. Now, this leads into, this leads into a discussion I kind of want to have. And the reason why, because, over the years in Marvel Comics, right, we always say that Jean Grey is madly in love with Cyclops. Like, that's her first love no matter what. And Wolverine is always her second choice. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, because over the years, you would have X-Men fans look back at different moments and be like, hey, at that time right there, you could tell that Jean Grey would rather be with Wolverine than Cyclops. And for me personally, this is one of those moments. And let me explain why. Because you have Wolverine trying to go into the afterlife. He's okay with the idea of dying and moving on with his life. But the thing is, Illyana the angel say, no, it's not your time to die. And so while pushing him away, he hears all the other members of the X-Men calling out to Jean. And the reason why, because Jean Grey is about to die. She is about to be sucked out of the Blackbird and possibly die. And so she is hanging for her life. And so the other X-Men are not able to get to her. And so with her hanging for her life and them calling out for her, is Logan saying, I can't die yet because Jean Grey needs me. And so at the very last second, when it seems like Jean is going to die, Logan saves her by pulling her back in. But when he does, she says, Logan, you came back for me. And Logan said, no, I came back because you needed me. You called me back. Like, I came back here because I wanted you. And so it kind of seems like to me that Jean Grey would, be with Wolverine. It kind of seems like, hey, she's still technically, just a girlfriend of Cyclops, not fiance, not wife. Like, she could still leave Cyclops for Logan. And there is a chance here for it to happen. Now, some time has passed by after that moment where you had the heroes being able to get back to the X Mansion safely. Now, Wolverine is supposed to be on the sideline. As Logan, there's no way he'll be on the sideline for too long. So you have the different X-Men, in the danger room going through a training session. And the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, because while you have the X-Men going through this training session, you have Logan wanting to get in. He's like, hey, you know what? Let me in. I want to see if I still have it. Now, his body is still recovering after what Magneto did to him. And so for Logan, as he goes through this actual training session, he's not what he used to be. Not as fast, not as strong. Like, he is really slowed down a lot and taking some big hits, and it really does hurt him a lot as well. But not being able to hit hard as he used to be. Now, this is the moment where you have fans kind of wondering, okay, where are they going to go next when it comes to Wolverine? Because as we all know, Wolverine's bones were laced with adamantium. If that was ripped off his body, does he still have his claws? And the answer is yes, he does. We learn right here that apparently his claws were bone claws that were originally laced with adamantium. And so that's why he had claws in his, hands. And so for Wolverine, he pops it out. But the problem is, healing factor is still working overdrive here. And so when he does pop his claws out of his hand, he bleeds a lot. He's in serious pain. He's not able to properly heal up like he should. It's like, oh my God, they have to call in the medical team. Now, the ending of this book is Wolverine leaving the X-Men. And the reason why, because he has to figure out about his life, because he had no idea at first that he had those claws, those bone claws. He believed that originally the claws were implants, but now he's realizing that that's not true, that the adamantium just covered his bone claws. And so now he's wondering more about his past, but also kind of wondering what to do with his life. So he leaves a message, a letter for each member of the X-Men. But for Jubilee, it's him telling her, like, hey, I need you to stay here with Charles Xavier. Like, he can help you. He can guide you like he did me and the others. And so you have Logan leave. And that ends Fatal Attractions for the 5th chapter of this crossover. We still have one more chapter, and that would be Excalibur. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over Fatal Attractions. And technically, we're at the end of our coverage of the actual event because we already covered the first 5 chapters of Fatal Attractions and all the storyline that took place between those chapters. And so now it's time for us to cover the final chapter, which is Excalibur issue number 71. Now, with this chapter alone, it's really being used as a way to kind of push Colossus away officially from the X-Men along with Wolverine, but also kind of setting up the new idea of Excalibur, because now Excalibur is going to be an X-Men book. And what I mean by that statement, when it came to Chris Claremont in the early days of Excalibur, he was trying his best to make sure that Excalibur stayed away from the other X books. So in the beginning, you did not have Excalibur crossing over with the X-Men or X-Factor or New Mutants or X-Force, none of that. Excalibur stayed away from the other X teams. Now, occasionally, you would have small crossovers, small team-ups, but like only for an issue or two, and that would be it. But in the 90s, when it came to Marvel, when it came to X-Men getting really popular, they want all their different X books begin to work together. So X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur, Wolverine, Cable, and future books coming down the road in the 90s like Generation X. And so this is the point where we could say that Excalibur is now technically an actual X book and will be used alongside the other X books in the 1990s. Now, for the final chapter of Fatal Attractions, being Excalibur issue 71, I do want to say that it's really more about Colossus. And let me explain. You see, when it came to Colossus in the earlier parts of really the 1990s, going into Fatal Attractions, the man had went through a lot. Let me explain. So his brother died by suicide. His parents were killed off by the Russian government. And then his sister died by the legacy virus. All of that happened in a very short period of time for Colossus in the 1990s. So for him, he has gone through a lot. And so he also got injured in an annual storyline we did not cover. And so with his head injury, you have the X-Men believe that he is not thinking straight. But either way, when it came to Colossus, he felt like Charles Xavier's goals are not going to be able to be achieved, meaning that he does not believe that sooner or later the X-Men should be able to help the mutants and the humans live together in harmony. For him, he's all like, listen, your ways are not working. I'm going to go ahead and join Magneto's side when it comes to the whole idea of helping out the mutant race. And so now this chapter alone is going to be more of trying to get Colossus back on the side of good again. And so as we dive into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with Nightcrawler fighting against an Acolyte. Now remember, the Acolytes are different people who are mutants who believe in what Magneto is trying to achieve. Now, some of them were captured in the earlier parts of Fatal Attractions and brought over to Muir Island. Now, here's the thing. When it came to Magneto in the 4th chapter of Fatal Attractions, he had released an EMP across the entire world. And so when he did that, he had shut down almost all technology across the world, including the prison that Moira McTaggart had for different members of the Acolytes that were captured. And so you have Excalibur going out of their way to capture the mutants who are on the run. Now, something else I should mention is that by this point in our coverage over Excalibur, you only have 3 members left. Nightcrawler, Rachel Summers the Phoenix, and also Kitty Pryde. The rest of the team have left in different kinds of ways. So right now, it's just these 3 members of Excalibur. But either way, for Nightcrawler, he hates the idea of fighting against an Acolyte. And the reason why, because this one right here is trying to say that what they are doing, going around killing off different humans, is not really a problem at all. And also, you had this guy trying to get on Nightcrawler's nerves by saying, look, even your friend Colossus realized that we are right, that maybe Magneto ways are better for the mutant race, and humans should be nowhere near mutants at all. Now, you do have Nightcrawler get so angry that he wants to kill off this Acolyte, and we do learn that for this Acolyte, he has the ability to play with your mind like that to push you in that emotion where you want to kill somebody. But luckily for Nightcrawler, he was stopped at the very last second by, well, Rachel Summers and Kitty Pryde. Now, can I just say that almost any time when it comes to Excalibur doing any kind of crossover is usually with the X-Men, but most of the time I feel like it's just Cyclops, Jean Grey, and also Charles Xavier. Now, we already know why, because Rachel Summers is the daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey from an alternate timeline. Really, today's video is going to be really important for Rachel as well, and Jean Grey and Cyclops as well. But with that being said, you do have those 3 characters arrive to Muir Island. And the reason why, because they need the help of Excalibur. But really, they need the help of Kitty Pryde. Now, the reason why Charles Xavier and the X-Men need the help of Kitty Pryde is because Kitty Pryde and Colossus used to be madly in love with one another. And so it's Charles saying, if I can use Kitty Pryde to call out to Colossus to bring him back down to Earth, then we can use that as a way to capture him. Because for Charles Xavier and Jean Grey, they believe the only reason why Colossus had joined Magneto's side is because of his head injury. And so it's Charles saying, if we are able to repair that head injury, then Colossus should be able to think straight. And once he does, he'll realize that Magneto ways is the wrong way for the mutant race. And so you did have Charles say, Kitty, we need you to call out to Colossus. And she says no and walks away. Now, for me, it's really Charles Xavier now realizing that all the people that he taught over the years are no longer just children. They're now adults, young adults, some in their late 20s, early 20s, some in their late teens. But either way, they're still adults. And so for Charles Xavier, he has to realize that now he has to talk to them as adults, not as children. And so when he does get mad at Kitty Pryde for walking away, she says, no, you're going to talk to me like I am an adult, because you have to understand I have emotions. I have feelings. The whole idea of being used as a pawn to bring Colossus down here is a problem. But at the same time, he understands that it's probably the best way to help out Colossus. And so you have Kitty Pryde go ahead and call out to Colossus. Now, when she does, it's her saying like, hey, I want to join your side, Magneto's side. I realize it's the best thing for the mutant race. Now, for Colossus, he's kind of worried here because he does not know if this could be a trap. But at the same time, he feels like it's not a trap because his love for Kitty Pryde is still so strong. He feels like their love should be enough to give her a reason to join his side, Magneto's side. Now, with Magneto being out of the picture, thanks to Charles Xavier, Exodus is now the one in charge of all the Acolytes. And so he tells Colossus, you get 1 hour. Go down there and try to recruit her. But if you're not back in 1 hour, we're coming down there for you. And so Colossus leaves. Now we jump back over to Excalibur and the X-Men, and we do see that Kitty Pryde is still worried. And the reason why, because for Kitty Pryde, she's kind of wondering, even if they're able to capture him and fix his mind, could Colossus rejoin the X-Men? She still believes Colossus might still leave and rejoin the Acolytes and Magneto's side. Now there is another character getting involved in this event, this storyline, and that would be Cable. Now, when it comes to Cable, the last time we saw him in the main storyline for Fatal Attractions, the man got completely wrecked by Magneto because Cable found out his old base, the Grey Malkin, was officially taken away from him by Magneto. And he tried his best to make sure Magneto could no longer use the Grey Malkin. Now, Avalon is actually the different parts of the Grey Malkin along with other parts of things that Magneto had found. Either way, for Cable, he's very upset about the fact that he lost the Grey Malkin to Magneto and the Acolyte. So he gets word that Colossus is going to meet up with Excalibur and the X-Men. He's all like, listen, in my mind, Colossus is a traitor. He's no longer on the side of good, which means that he got to be put down for his mistakes, for his consequence, for joining Magneto's side. Now, I want to jump over to Nightcrawler and Cyclops. And the reason why, because you have Nightcrawler feeling a type of way. And the reason why, because he is the leader of Excalibur, but he feels like he is a failure as a leader of Excalibur. And the reason why, because like I said earlier, most of the team is gone now. It's just him, Kitty Pryde, and Rachel Summers. And that's really it. And so he feels like that it's his fault that he lost the different members of his team. But you have Scott saying, no, that's just life as a team leader. There's going to be times where you're not going to be able to protect every single member of your team. The thing is, you just have to continue on for the ones you still have at the moment. It's him saying like, look, dude, you may have lost most of Excalibur, but you still have a team here. Right now, you have Rachel and Kitty Pryde. That's your team. Lead them. And then maybe over time, the rest might come back or new ones might be able to join in. Now, I want to jump over to Rachel Summers and also Jean Grey because, okay, when it came to these two characters in the late 80s and 90s, unfortunately, they did not have a strong relationship. And the reason why, because, well, Jean Grey. But for Jean Grey, she hated the idea of hearing that Rachel Summers was her daughter from an alternate timeline, right? And so for Jean Grey, she felt like she no longer had a choice of who she's going to marry because here is Rachel Summers saying, hey, listen, I'm your daughter, and you married Scott Summers. And for Jean Grey, she wanted to choose. She did not want to have it be destined for her to be with Scott Summers. Because of her, it kind of seemed like she might go over to Wolverine or possibly somebody else. But it seemed like she no longer had a choice. And so she gave Rachel the cold shoulder for a long time. But as Jean Grey kind of realizing that maybe she was in the wrong, because now she realized that she wants to marry Scott Summers. She wants to be with him. And this leads into the wedding of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. And we'll cover that in a later video. But for right now, it kind of shows that, hey, she's deciding that she wants to actually marry Scott Summers. And now she can be a mom to Rachel Summers. But now we can officially go ahead and get ready for the big scene where you have the X-Men and Excalibur going to work together to possibly capture Colossus. Because when we jump over to Kitty Pryde, she's in position waiting for him to just pop up so that she'll be able to, well, help with the idea of capturing him. And so you do have Colossus appear. Now for Colossus, he still believes in the possibility that their love is strong enough to bring her over to his side, Magneto's side. But of course, I already know that is not the case at all. But now we have to jump over to Cable. And here's the reason why. Because you have Cable getting ready to try to get the jump on Colossus. Because he still believes Colossus is now officially evil. And so the man had traveled all the way over to Muir Island. Except when he does arrive, he's then confronted by Rachel Summers. Now for Rachel, it's really more of she's trying to protect Colossus and the X-Men and Excalibur from Cable, but at the same time, she feels like there is some kind of connection. And for Cable, he's kind of like, it's strange. I also feel some kind of connection. This is the first time these two characters are officially meeting one another, the Summer Kids. But getting back over to the conversation between Colossus and Kitty Pryde, you do have the conversation kind of go in a way where you have Colossus at first trying to tell Kitty Pryde that why he had joined Magneto's side and why she should also join Magneto's side, but also kind of saying like, look, Charles Xavier goals are not going to be achieved at all because the way the earth is, the way the human race is. And so it's better for us to go ahead and leave rather than stay here to try to achieve some kind of goal that's not actually reachable. Now, while you have the two characters talking, Charles wants Jean Grey to go ahead and get a hold of Colossus' mind, but you have Jean say no. And the reason why, because Jean knows that Kitty is not in danger at all, because, well, the love between Colossus and Kitty Pryde. But after, I'd say a few more minutes, you then have the X-Men and Excalibur move in and they capture Colossus. And so now their goal is to begin the process of healing his mind. Now, I want to jump back over to the battle between Rachel Summers and also Cable, because you do have Cable trying his best to bring down Rachel Summers. But the thing is, she has the powers of the Phoenix, but also because she is I call a time tripper. And what I mean by that is Rachel is able to kind of move herself to different points in time. Now, her power has not been fully explored by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, but she was able to push herself 10 seconds into the future to dodge Cable's attack. Now, with that being said, she tries to continue to fight against Cable, but the problem is while trying to do that, her body begins to change, what seems to be the outfit of Captain Britain. While that battle is going on, we jump back over to the X-Men and Excalibur trying to work on the mind of, well, Colossus. And so while trying to do that, you did have our heroes realize that they got more trouble coming. And the reason why, because, well, some members of the Acolytes are there for Colossus. He only had 1 hour and that time is up. And they know that it was a trap. And so they came there to free their friend. Now, I want to jump back over to Cable and Rachel Summers' battle once again. And the reason why, because in the middle of the battle, it seems like somebody's trying to take over the body of, well, Rachel Summers. And they call out to Cable, but they call him by a different name, Ascani's son. Now, this is going to be very important as we dive deeper into Cable in our later coverage over the X-Men. But for right now, you have Cable just freaking out because he's wondering, what in the world is going on? How does she know that name? Now, with Cable being caught off guard, it allows Rachel to be able to use her powers to knock him out. But now she's wondering who in the world was that trying to take over her body, but also what is her connection to Cable. Now, for Colossus, his mind's getting healed thanks to Moira Taggart's tech. But here is the thing, guys. You see, even though our heroes were able to repair his mind, Colossus still believes in Magneto. And so at first, it's kind of like a celebration. They were able to heal his mind. He's now able to use his powers correctly. And it does seem like he may be able to think straight. But for Colossus, he says, y'all don't understand. Like, yes, my mind was technically damaged, but at the same time, what I felt was actually how I feel right now still, because I lost my brother. I lost my sister. I lost my parents. My whole entire family died literally in like a month or two, maybe 3. And so for me, it's kind of hard to move on that easily. And so, yes, I try my best to lock away my feelings. And so with his head injury, it seemed like for him, that was the only way to move on through life, to lock away how he truly felt. But now his mind being healed, he's being healed with all those different kinds of feelings of the idea of losing his entire family. And so you had Kitty Pryde say, you're not a failure as a brother. Like, yes, your sister died, but you were still there by her side until her final moments. Now, in reality, he was not, because he was away on a mission when she had died, but he was still there by her side most of the time. While you had Excalibur and also the X-Men trying to heal the mind of Colossus, you had Nightcrawler fighting against the different members of the Acolytes. Now, before their battle was able to continue on, you have Colossus say, everybody stop right now. And the reason why, because I realize that even though I am now able to think straight, I'm still going to join Magneto's side. And here's the reason why, because both sides, Charles and Magneto, their ways of trying to achieve goals for the mutant race is great. And really, their goals are somewhat similar. The problem is that it's how they're trying to execute their goals, their plans to reach those goals. And so for Colossus, he feels like right now, Magneto's plans might be the best way, but Magneto's plan needs some just fine tuning. It's Colossus saying, with Magneto gone, somebody has to carry on his goals. And right now, it's going to be Exodus, who's in charge of the Acolytes. But Colossus is going to be there as a way to kind of guide the Acolytes in a better way to help achieve Magneto's goals. But yeah, Colossus leaves once again. Now, I kind of want to end this video on a good note for both Fatal Attractions, but also for Excalibur, because when it comes to Nightcrawler, he is telling us that this is going to be a new team, a new direction for the team, because he realized that right now the mutant race has a lot of problems on their hands, right? And even though we have so many different teams, X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur, the X-Men, all these different teams, there's still going to be some problems that are going to fall through the cracks. And so it's Nightcrawler saying Excalibur is going to handle those problems right there, but also we're going to be a team that's not going to be on the sideline at all. That basically we're going to handle problems before they're able to grow into a bigger problem. And so just like that, we now have a new bold direction for Excalibur with just Nightcrawler, Kitty Pryde, and Rachel Summers. But most likely we're going to see other characters jump in down the road. But this is where we're going to end Fatal Attractions and also today's video. But guys, this was amazing, guys. But anyways, I'll see you on the next comic book video. Later.